Welcome to this second session in today's pop-up Festival of Dangerous Ideas here in Melbourne, brought to you by the Wheeler Centre. I'm Michael Williams, the Wheeler Centre's director. For those of you just joining us who didn't make the first session today, it was Dan Savage, and let me recap what he had to say. No, I'm not going to. You can watch the video on wheelercentre.com at some point in the not-too-distant future, but don't watch it at work. And if you do, put the headphones on. That's my advice. We're thrilled to be hosting the Festival of Dangerous Ideas here in Melbourne for the very first time. It's been going for almost as long as the Wheeler Centre has. And as two organisations, we have very common aims, and they centre around the importance of conversation, the fact that ideas should be challenging, they should be dangerous, but most importantly, they should be aired, and we should have forums in which we come together as a community and throw those ideas around and respond to those challenges and get motivated by them to go out into the streets and change the way we live our lives. This second session in today's pop-up festival is one that turns the gaze of danger onto ourselves, and it promises to be a terrific one. Arlie Hochschild is a professor emerita of sociology at the University of California, Berkeley. She's the author of 8 books, including The Outsourced Self, The Second Shift, and So How's the Family, and other essays. In Global Woman, Nannies, Maids and Sex Workers, a book she co-edited with Barbara Ehrenreich, she explored the global migration of care workers, and then in The Outsourced Self, she examines how we need to keep our personal lives feeling personal, even as we turn to the market to meet ever more of our needs. Her books have appeared in 16 languages. She's received pretty much any award you can think of. Please welcome the extraordinary Arlie Hochschild.
What a pleasure to be here and to share with you a kind of a problem that I have. Here I have written a book, The Outsourced Self, about some very nice people who are doing often very essential services. They're giving time to people, they're giving expertise to people. How could you be against this? This is nice people doing good things, often good things. And on the other hand, here we are at the Festival for Dangerous Ideas. So what am I doing here? What are you doing here? What's dangerous? And I think we can begin with a quote from George Orwell, which says to see what is in front of one's nose takes a constant struggle. So what's the struggle? What are we struggling against? I think we're struggling against the idea that I'll look at it later, I don't have time to look at it now, a sort of a sweeping under the rug of something that we actually are feeling. So what I'd like to do with you here today is lift up the rug, take our torch, or flashlight as we call it in the US, and see what's under there, what is making us struggle. So I'd like to do 3 things today. One is to take you with me on a journey that I was on in researching the outsourced self, to tell you a few stories that people told to me, and to lift out some ideas to think about. And I have to say, I love the idea of a festival for dangerous ideas. I just love it because it opens out the social space for us to ask questions that, if we ask them individually, might feel too scary, make us anxious. So I'm thrilled to be here. Now, so let's begin our journey. And imagine that we're comparing our lives, modern 2-job family lives, with lives even just 40 or 50 years ago. A lot more is outsourced, but some are perfectly normal, average things, like a summer camp. This is part of the cake of custom. One's lucky to get into a good one. So, and then there's childcare. Modern in the United States, with 70% of moms working outside the home, we have childcare. Again, we want to get a good one, part of the cake of modern custom. But now the market, now we're beginning our journey, gets a little more specialized. Here we have a service that will help you find your babysitter. In other words, a kind of a babysitting headhunter. And beyond that, you can hire someone who will pull out the electrical cords and make sure it's a safely baby-proofed house. And let's not go there so fast. There's you can, in the United States today, also hire a nameologist. In case you're anxious about exactly what name to give your child, you can go to Dr. Corwitz, a nameologist, who believes that a name, the sight and sound of it, the initials, the possible nicknames, design the child's personality. So Garth encourages sports. Zeta and Ford foster art. I wasn't sure about the Ford. And she, in her ads for her service, says, find out which names encourage weight problems, attention deficit disorder, fear of intimacy, poverty syndrome, and addiction. Also learn which names stimulate leadership ability, financial reward, creativity, and satisfying soul-mate connections. So watch out for Michael and Tom and Susan. Not everyone uses that one, but there are a number of people in upper middle class circles these days who hire birthday party planners. And often there is an entertainer. And actually, I interviewed a very lovely guy who told me this. He said, look, I work crazy hours. He was a banker, his wife too. And he had a 6-year-old daughter coming up for a birthday. And all that daughter's friends also had parents who hired birthday party planners, didn't have time to do it themselves, they're crazy busy, and the planners know how to do it, so what's the harm? They did it. And he was saying, look, enough's enough. I don't get to be with my kid enough time. I'm going to put on the party. So he sent out the invitations, and he blew up the balloons, and he put the tail on the donkey kind of game up on the wall, and the little kids came in with their parents and sat down. He had the idea from other professional services that you had to have an entertainer like this guy. So he thought, what would be fun? I'll dress up like Crocodile Dundee, the Australian inspiration. So he put on a hat and boots and stalked up and down. And here you had these 8 little 6-year-olds all cross-legged sitting on the floor watching. And he began to talk about crocodiles and how they were different from alligators. And then there were kangaroos. And then there were koala bears. And what did the koala bears eat? And then he ran out of things to say. And the kids began to wiggle, and because it was a planned party, unless there was an organizer, the kids fell apart. So all the parents had to put down their glass of white wine and kind of come forward and get the kids back in order. And a neighbor who had been watching this took this man aside and said, "Michael, get real. You know, the professionals know what 6-year-olds think is funny." Pause. Orwell moment. And the man himself felt, at first he was very embarrassed and, the thing had flopped. And then after a while he said, my neighbor's right. I was harder than I thought, and I didn't do it that well, and next time I'll just turn it over. But his wife was watching this in an amused way, and she said, "Why don't you interview our daughter?" So I did, after a while, and she said, "At first we were embarrassed, then we thought it was hilarious, and now I think, what a dad I have that he could jump in with 3 feet and love me that much." So there was kind of a moment there of how confident we are in our own lives. There are things for girls. It's very specialized, sliced and diced, these little moments of family ritual life. And then there's a kind of a service. This is, at bar mitzvahs in Long Island, we have these gawky 14-year-olds that don't dare to get on the stage. There are professional party animators, come in and just are cool and get you dancing on the floor. So animation becomes something that one can professionalize and buy. Okay, here is the letter that a child would write after the party to the planner. And here's an example. "Dear Sophie, thank you very much for the very special, really fun birthday party. I had the best time playing games, digging for eggs, having cake. Thanks again for helping make my birthday so special. Love, Harrison." And sometimes Harrison will say, there'll be another letter. "So what are you doing on Saturday?" He's got a new friend. All of this completely harmless. All right, I don't know how it is here in Melbourne, but San Francisco, we have a lot of dog walkers. You can hire someone to walk your dog, to feed your dog, to mind your dog, to groom your dog, to dye your dog's hair, and they're dog psychologists who help straighten out problems. You might need that. And again, there was a man who said this, "You know what, I work long hours and I can't change that. And my wife does too, and so we love our dog. And so from Monday to Friday, we hire Sarah Ann, and she walks the dog for us." And then he raised his voice. It was like he was almost surprising himself. He said, "But Saturday, whoa, who would hire someone to walk their dog on Saturday? Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, or Sunday?" It's this sort of sudden indignation. He said, "And then, why have a dog?" And that's where I knew the why have-us, why have a party, why have a dog, why have a child, was a moment in which somebody was drawing a cultural line. And this is a book about an exploration, a journey into how we draw lines to keep personal life personal. And this man drew the line at Friday. Well, it isn't just such services, but services go even farther into our personal life. And there are many for-pay services that find you a romantic partner. It's a huge trend in the United States. Match.com and eHarmony are two big ones, but there's Great Expectations. there's Big Church, there's Asia Friends, Platinum Romance, OK Cupid, many, many. And so again, what could be hard? What's dangerous here? I mean, people meet each other, people are lonely, they want to come together. And we're looking here only at a double-edged sword. We're not saying it's bad, we're not saying it's necessarily dangerous, but here's an example of what one woman ran into. She was 49, lonely, looking for somebody, and she said, you know what, I'm going to get on Match.com. But she didn't want to make any mistakes, so she hired a love coach. A very nice man. They never met each other. One was in New Jersey, the other was in Los Angeles. I talked to them both. Both very nice people. By the way, everyone in this book is really a nice person. And, this isn't a book about people. It's a book about culture. And so here's what he told her. Look, he said, look, looking for romance is work. Don't think of it as romantic. It's work. You have to put in the hours, the FaceTime. And she said, I work hard. Okay. And then he said, you have to think of yourself as on a market, so you have to brand yourself. And she said, well, I don't think about brands, but okay. And he said, I'll help you do that. I can brand you. And so he picked out the photograph and he wrote the description. And she said, okay. And he said, you have to understand, in a market, you have a numerical value. It's a 1 to 10 scale. You're a little over the hill. 4 or 5, and be prepared. There might not be so many comers. And she said, okay. And then he said, an ROI. Do you know what ROI is? Return on investment. You have to be efficient, so you don't want to waste your time here. So there's a kind of a way of thinking that she was inducted into. And all the time she said, look, this is a means to an end. And I get it that I'm going to have to think in a market way in order to get to a non-market romantic situation. And so what happened was this. He said, look, I have great intuition. I can scan through all the applicants here of men responding to you. And she said, actually, I'm going to draw the line there. She said, I want to be able to tell the man of my dreams when I find him that I chose him. And let's just pause at that little moment where she's deciding to put her personal signature on this. Well, there are 2 stories to tell at the end. One was she met Mr. Wrong, and as Mr. Wrong went out the door, he said, you were so easy to find. I'm going to go right back onto Match.com and find someone just like you. And she thought, wait a minute, I'm not a box of cereal. There isn't a duplicate. You can't just go into the store, in aisle 3 and find a duplicate of me. That this man, probably, although I didn't talk to him, a very nice man. But it's a man who stepped over that market line to begin to think in a markety kind of way about an intimate thing. So, but the end of the story is she found Mr. Right. And he was nothing like, he didn't fit any of the characteristics she had on her shopping list. He was shorter than her and bald and a musician. She was looking for a tall, dark engineer. But he was a wonderful, kind person. I interviewed him too. So good things can come of this. But it's it's a new, I would argue, kind of experience of combing through this market language. We've always had markets. This market isn't new, but this kind of market, I would argue, is. Okay, so there are romantic markets. There are also, by the way, friend finders without romance. You just can sign up to find a friend too. Okay, life coaching. There are many different forms of life coaching. You can hire someone to come in and arrange your family photograph albums. You know, Uncle Fred on left. But in whose handwriting is that? Okay, suppose you find your beloved. Now you can get help in the magical ring discovery moment. You wouldn't want to be alone. So you can get some paid help. Then, before you get married, you can get some premarital therapy. And actually, this group assigns one of my books, The Second Shift. Oh, well, maybe that's a good one. They're wedding planners now, very conventional thing to turn to, and someone to pick out your music. Now for elder care, if your parent is living at a distance or you don't have time, you're working long hours, you can hire someone to be your parent's friendly visitor. And that's very common. Or to pick out a nursing home. There are nursing homes, but now there's someone you can hire that gathers the family together to discuss which nursing home for your elderly parent. And then there's a service in Los Angeles that can help you grieve. The Shiva sisters will help you sit Shiva. And finally, someone who will help you tend the grave. And one of these offers reverent grave tenders. All right, so, maybe we need these things. But, so what could be wrong? Aren't you asking? I mean, it's so okay with complex modern lives. We can't go back, to yesteryear, and there aren't great, in my country, public provisions and parental leave or something that gives you more time at home. Hours of work are up, and we're not stopping that. So maybe we need all this, but let's look at a new language that's coming in. Rent a friend. And this is Rent a Dad. Now, he does not look awfully sure. of what's being rented. There is Rent-A-Hubby. There's a whole chain in the United States. And then there's Rent-A-Grandma. But now, which grandma would you want to hire? You can browse grandmas. And all of them have one benefit, which is they don't text or tweet while watching your children. They don't know how. And then there's Rent-A-Mom. And then there's, of course, cooking. In the United States, a short century ago, 95% of food dollars were spent on food that was prepared and consumed at home. Now, only half of food dollars are spent that way. And I had a funny experience of going into homes and finding that I would be conducted to people's oven. Hey, you want to see my new oven? Okay. New stove, our kitchen remodel. And then we would sit down and I would ask them, well, how do you cook? Oh, cook? We don't cook. We don't cook. So I began to think of the oven as a religious object, like this totem that you came to worship. It's sort of like a fireplace, We don't actually use fireplaces to warm ourselves anymore in the United States, but we like to have one, and we put our family photographs. It has a symbolic meaning. I thought, I wonder if that's what's happening to the stove. Okay, I don't want to take too much time because I want us to be able to converse about this, but there is a consulting service now where a professional consultant can come in. The way you would come into an office and evaluate the performance of a worker, now the service can come in and evaluate the performance of a dad. How are you doing, Dad? And they have the family assemble around a table with little stubby pencils and questionnaires to fill out, and scales. One of the scales is the 1 to 7 family creation scale. How are you doing in creating memories? It's a memory creation scale. So I'm partly thinking, wow, this isn't just a new language, rent a this, rent a mom, rent a grandma, but it's a kind of a new way of thinking about life at home, potentially. And once you've gone through your evaluation, there is a growth summary. Dad, you're doing better. They'd ask, how do you do in holding your temper and listening, being a good listener and so on. So you can get a growth summary and then an investment guide. Are you going to invest in high leverage activities that really get you a lot of memory? For a small amount of time. In a way, all of this feels to me personally like tragicomic. It's not putting anyone down. People are nice. But the culture, where are we going? And if we're thinking about family memory in this way. All right, now I'm going to end our tour here with something, with two things that are a little extreme. Okay? The first is an ad on Craigslist. I don't know if you guys had Craigslist here, but it was an ad of a man who said, I'm looking for a shapely woman in her 20s or 30s. She'll get $30 for doing my billing and laundry. She'll get, I think it's $130 for traveling with me, and $130 for going to occasions with me, and it was even more, like $170 or something for sensual massages. And then it said, no escorts, no sex, please. And I showed this to my students in a sociology family class at UC Berkeley. And one woman said, I have not seen this ad, but it doesn't surprise me. And another very thoughtful student said, the man wants to buy a wife, but he doesn't want to be a husband. So, and the third student said, wow, that salary looks pretty good. The new market in personal services is more professionally specialized, expert-driven. it's more technologically driven, and it's also more global. And so, oh, here it is, $40. I had the amounts of time of money wrong, but the idea was right. Okay, so now we're switching really to a different kind of level of seriousness, but I want to put them in a strange continuum for us to think dangerous thoughts about. There are surrogate services now that are not only domestic but international, for pay, commercial surrogacy. And I went to a surrogacy agency, a center in Gujarat, India, and interviewed surrogate women whose clients would live in the United States or Canada, and an infertile couple would be able to harvest the egg of the woman, the sperm of the man, put them together in a petri dish, and that zygote would be implanted in the womb of an Indian surrogate who would be paid money to live for 9 months in a separate dormitory away from her husband, quality control, and she was told to think of her womb as a carrying case, and she was told kind of not to have personal relations with the intended parents. So here they are, the surrogates. They're already married, have had children of their own, are very eager to earn the money they badly needed. It's the head of the clinic, is the woman I interviewed. Here they are. And there's the baby. Births took place on Tuesdays by C-section. It was more efficient, and there was no breastfeeding. Sometimes there was contact with the baby. Often there was contact with the baby for a few minutes, and then it was gone. And I'm inviting you to think about this. Personally, I think surrogacy can be an extraordinarily beautiful gift that one woman gives a couple. But what I saw there was a commercialization of surrogacy and market notion of human relations was being transferred to people in a highly personal situation. So I'm going to come to what the dangers, let's ask ourselves. I mean, this seems like such a good, bad, funny, sad realm of life that I don't believe we're really looking at or asking big questions about. So, in a way, danger one seems to me to be that we'll take all this for granted. Maybe it's not happening in Melbourne yet, but I wonder if what I found in the United States is what's going to happen here in a short few years. And maybe the danger is that this will become quickly normal, and we won't look at it. And we'll feel that it fits our needs, and we won't ask how those needs came to be constructed. In other words, will those needs be increasingly shaped by the very experts who ministered to them? And the neighbors, for example, like the neighbor who said, look, you don't have to know what makes your kid giggle. The professional knows. So hire the professional. So in that case, it wasn't the professional herself saying that, but a neighbor who had believed that. So we may lose confidence in our own capacity to live the meaningful and joyful lives that we want to live. And I wonder whether we aren't getting ourselves into a cycle so that if we need these services, well, we've got to work long hours to earn the money to pay for the services. But if we're working those long hours to pay for the services, we're not on a hike making a friend, and we're not coming to a public forum where you could discuss things. We're perhaps in a cycle. And on each side of the cycle may be a strange set of pinchers. On one side, events in the marketplace are making us anxious that we're not going to be able to live the good, happy lives we want to. There's a class gap growing, and we're not sure if we're going to go up or going to go down. So we're anxious to get our kid in the right school, and we're not sure about of our personal lives, and we want to do it the best we can. So trends, and the market isn't the only one, but trends are acting on us to make us anxious. And there's the market at the other end. It's the other pincher that says, we can do something about your anxiety. So that we may be into a cycle. And the question this leaves us with is, where do our needs come from? What are the other ways? It's good to have needs. We all have needs. And we can't live our lives alone. But where are those needs coming from? What are the other alternatives? What has happened to friendship in the age of Facebook? On the one hand, what kinds of public provisions are available to us that can relieve us of financial anxieties? What kind of balance is there between the market and everything else? In the United States, that's a good question to ask because we are living in neoliberal times. There's a privatization of schools, privatization of prisons and parks, even now libraries, public libraries, a sort of inroads into public life. And a lot of things you can buy. If you're in a jail and you haven't committed a violent crime in Santa Ana, California, for $90, you can get a jail upgrade. So there's kind of a movement into an everything for sale world. And before we move there, maybe we need to ask some dangerous questions about how to rebalance our lives and put the market in it, but where it belongs. Thank you.
It's a fascinating area from a kind of identity perspective, but it seems to me the other part of it is about an abdication of responsibility to a broader social compact, responsibility to our neighbours, to our fellow citizens. And it seems to me to be a kind of cultural shift that's writ large in our governments. They're abdicating responsibility at a moral level at every stage they can. How much do you see this as a kind of endemic problem in our society?
Yes, very good. I think what you're saying is that we have to look at the infrastructure of personal lives. I think people want to take personal responsibility and want to have friends and civic ties and don't want to be forced into the market to meet needs that could be met in other ways. But I think you're absolutely right. The governments, in a way, are making choices about this. Shall we put our citizens in this situation and make them need money to buy their lives? Or are we going to put value on things you don't need money for? I mean, I guess that's what it comes down to. And what I most fear, I would say, is that even if we don't buy anything, we come to think and feel in a buying-like way so that we focus on the purchase point, the perfect party, the perfect wedding, the well-raised child. And we erase meaning and joy from the journey to that destination and focus only on the destination itself. And if that's happened, there's been, I think, a profound distortion of the human possibilities of life. And governments, it looks unrelated, but I think the governments, the people we choose to represent us and their policies impact those personal moments. The personal is political.
I think, is there a question over this side? Yep.
Okay, Arlie, I'm a psychologist and I see people a lot with these questions. They often say that they work really hard in the long hours to get what they want and they need. What's one of the things that we can take away from a day-to-day level of trying to get what we need without outsourcing our life?
Wow. Well, I think that psychologists can do a lot to bring these questions into the therapy hour. You know, where are you looking for meaning, for example? Even if the party goes awry, wasn't it meaningful that you tried to make it? And in the case I gave, you know, at the end of the day, this man found meaning in his, quote, failure. It wasn't a failure. It was an exhibit of his own effort to participate. So I guess what any psychologist such as yourself does is help hold a mirror up to the patient. But the mirror needs to, I think, pull back a little and look at the culture that is influencing how people see their choices. Yeah.
Thank you. Still over that side?
I have two questions. The situation you're describing of outsourcing different parts of our lives, well, they're not a problem in themselves. The question is, what do we gain and what do we lose by doing that? So I'm wondering, from both sides of the equation, people who've tried outsourcing things that currently look ridiculous, like weddings or spending time with their children, what do they feel they've gained from it? Have you spoken to people who've tried outsourcing and then going back to their previous model of doing their life? And conversely, the people who perform the outsourced jobs, how do they feel that they're gaining or losing?
Yeah, wonderful questions. And in fact, that's what I did on my journey in researching this book. I interviewed both the party planners, the life coaches, the wantologist, the surrogates, and those who hired them. And I met many very thoughtful clients who said, well, look, we were unsure of ourselves. We wanted to do it right, and or we needed the time. And there was some ambivalence. Some would one woman said, there are some things I need and have outsourced, other things that I think other people need and have outsourced, but I have to arrange in our lives certain things that represent our personal lives. And she gave an example of on the weekend. She said they worked really hard, but on the weekend they unplugged everything electrical. They went out and put up a tent and camped out in their backyard, you know, and talked about civilization. So that was a quite inventive, I thought, way of getting back to basics, is what she called it. People were struggling with just this question and often feeling like they wanted to do some pullbacks. You know, one woman had, people would live these very workaholic lives and then do pullbacks. And one woman had had someone to do her gardening, and she said, I don't know the names of the plants. I'm not friends with my garden. So, so let me take this over, let me do this. And she did it with her kids, and they planted a garden. And it was hugely meaningful to her to do that, take back. Yeah.
I'm fascinated by that kind of example where someone hires a gardener to tend their garden, and having a beautifully tended garden is part of their sense of self. Their identity is tied up with this thing that is actually at a remove. And I'm curious about the extent to which that outsourcing allows for self-delusion as well. I can be the kind of person that I believe I should be, rather than the kind of person I genuinely am.
That's right. That you have all these hidden helpers, and then you stand forward as the author of everything around you. Actually, I interviewed a personal assistant who said that she was hired to pick out a certain wines and so on, and then she was invited to the party where the man himself claimed he picked out the wines, but it was part of her job to be discreet about that. So there is these delusions, I think. But I also I was on the radio in Sydney the other day, and a gardener called in. He said, I take care of a vast garden. People I work for couldn't possibly do the work I do. And I asked him, is it part of your job to help the client enjoy the garden? He said, absolutely. And he said, actually, I enjoy the garden more than the guy I work for.
I'll take a question over this side.
I understand it's natural to see the economic anxiety that leads to the demand, but isn't it also true that there's an anxiety coming from our economy with the explosion of the service role that creates the supply as well? Just giving you the example, there are so many people now with higher degrees that cannot find work in that sort of area. For example, the lady over there who was a psychologist, I imagine there are probably many more psychology graduates than there are actually psychologists practicing in their field.
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful point. As industrial jobs have gone out, you could say that service jobs have come in, and a lot of the jobs are of this sort. But the service providers I talked to would say things like this. A party planner would say, I'm happy to do what I'm doing. I'm good at it. I give children enjoyment. But I'd give my right arm to put on parties in children's cancer wards if only I could get paid for it. If there were public sector that were there. And there were life coaches who said, I'd like to take teenagers that really are on the verge of making decisions in their lives and live in poor circumstances. I could really make a difference if only I could get paid for it. So they all agreed that there would be plenty of jobs out there if they corresponded to real social needs. Something for us as a culture to think about.
Back over this side.
Hi there. My question is, I guess on an individual level, like everyone here probably is already a little bit converted, but how are you going to get the bigger forces, like the economic system we've got, it, encourages this sort of behaviour, and we've got governments who see benefit in that as well, whether it be outsourcing or GDP. These are all measurable things and they're deemed positive, as far as jobs, economy, money exchanging hands. I guess how are we going to get that grander scale shift back to measuring things that can't be measured like dollars?
That's a dangerous kind of a question to ask, and a highly important one. I don't have any, bag of magic tricks, but I would say that we're at a moment in which there are certain social policies. For example, I associate them with neoliberalism of really, let's just expand the market, let's not regulate it, let's withdraw government and withdraw services for people. Let's live the fantasy of Milton Friedman, you know, Friedman, the great market guy. And he was saying, well, look, it's better if you buy everything. It's giving you choice. So I think we don't have to say yes to that, and that forums actually like this, where we get to ask, first to name the problem, and then ask the question. And I think we need a lot of services, and it's not the market itself, but it's the degree to which it's compensating for things missing in our lives. Seems to me that's where the problem lies. And I think we need to vote for politicians who see this as a problem.
Thank you. And also over there.
Looking at the paid surrogacy question, whilst I'm aware of the deep biological need for women, or indeed couples, to have a child or children, do you think that we have a right to have a child at any cost?
Wow.
Time to get dangerous, Arlie.
Time to what?
Time to get dangerous. Name and shame.
Yeah. Let me begin by saying that I asked that question to a lot of people that I interviewed for this book, and I got every kind of answer. There were people who said, look, there are many children who need to be adopted in this world. Why don't we, create a culture that encourages adoption? Does a child need to be your genetically owned child? Isn't nurture something we can give to anybody? And then there were those who said, no, I could understand why people want their own genetic child, but couldn't there be someone in the community, someone in the church, someone in the family that would offer this personal gift? And then there were those who say, well, actually, you may not want to have a personal relationship with, it's too personal a relationship, too inescapable a relationship with the person that does it. So maybe you do need a service, but it shouldn't be a for-profit service. Like in England, you can do it, but it's not, the agency shouldn't be out for a fast buck. And then there are those that say, no, talked to a cab driver actually, who said, no, it's fine to have a for-profit agency. But the woman herself, the surrogate, should not be financially motivated. Well, then there was someone, you can see all these moral stopping points. And then there was one who said, no, it's fine. She needs the money. She should do it for the money. Why not? And then this cab driver stopped. It's okay if she does it once or twice, but the third time, no, then she's turning into a baby machine. So I had the feeling that what's really happening here is that the world itself is confused, and that we have two headless horsemen. One is technology. And technology and science, the scientist just wants to discover things, and it's going one way. And the other headless horseman is the market, capitalism, wanting to earn profits. And the two headless horsemen are going ahead, and we are stuck in a culture lag. Our ideas have not caught up to these rapidly galloping ahead trends. So you ask me what I personally think. I would put it this way. I would like to live in a culture where adoption is valued, is honored, is encouraged, because there are children who need to be adopted. But I can understand if someone wants their own genetic child. But I think that it could be an enormous gift of one woman to a family, a couple, but that it has to be done humanely. And what I saw was a kind of George Orwell kind of marketization of human bonds that I think went way too far.
I am curious about, the question centred around whether you have a right to this expectation. And it seems to me part of this outsourcing and service thing springs from a sense of entitlement, that we're told that there are certain things that we might reasonably expect are our rights, living in a privileged society. Where do you think that tension lies, that expectation and that sense of entitlement with the way in which we expect to be able to abdicate responsibility?
Yeah. Are you referring to surrogacy in particular, or just altogether?
Altogether.
Yeah.
Expanding it out from surrogacy.
Yeah, well, a lot of it is we come to need what is sold to us as a possible good life. And we don't have forums like this where we get to question, hey, does that guy's idea of a good life correspond to mine? Perhaps regain a confidence in our own capacity to create good lives free of these ads.
We've got time, I think, for one more question, which I'm going to take from over there because you're waving your hand faster. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Arlie, for your ideas and your thoughts. Very thought-provoking. I don't really have questions, just sort of thoughts.
I'm really sorry.
Sorry. And I had to chuckle when you're talking about the gardening. I've created a lot of gardens over the years, and I live on a very steep block of land, and I'm finally getting a landscape to design it, and I've had so much trouble with that.
But do you enjoy the gardens you do?
Oh, I love them. It's not quite on the same level as surrogacy or anything. One thing I was interested in, a woman over there, and no sort of offence, talked about the models that we're working under, that we're living under. And are we living under models? What's happened to our instinct and our second nature and everything? Are we second guessing how to make a friend, how to have a romantic event, how to create a birthday party for our children? Do we second guess everything?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because, I don't know, maybe the Japanese model, again without any offence, we have to get our children into the best preschool so that they get to the best high school, so they get to the best university, so they can go and work 20 hours a day and outsource everything themselves. So, is this, how do you wind it back?
Yes, good. I think we wind it back by re-engaging community. And in 2008, there was a big economic downturn, a recession, basically, in the United States. And I don't know if it hit as hard here as it did there, but people lost their jobs, people lost their homes, and they began to turn inward. That they were ashamed of these losses, they were hurt, and it's a kind of people put themselves in isolation, and a new trend took place of starting what were called common security clubs. Now they're called resilience circles. But a group of 10 neighbors would get together, or 10 people from the union hall, or people from the church, or just friends. And they would go around the circle, what do you need? How can I help? And people would come forward with their needs, and they'd set up a skill exchange. Someone who's good on the computer but needed someone to watch grandma. There was a skill exchange. They bought food in bulk, cut their food bills in half. And they went around, it started in the Northeast where it's very cold during the winter, And they went around each weekend winterizing people's houses and cutting the heating bill in half. And in the meantime, they made friends. And it was a re-engagement of community. And in fact, this thing has spread really across the country now. But you know, they had to relearn how to be part of a community and have those kinds of friends. Because initially, people were very happy to offer, but they felt ashamed to ask. And there was a whole language. Oh, that was a big ask. One woman had been in a hospital. She came home and she was lonely. And she said, well, I was going to my other Common Security Club members at the last meeting, but that was a big ask. And one guy who grew up in the Virgin Islands and said, you know what, I grew up poor. If my neighbor had a ladder, why would I buy a ladder? I would go and borrow his, and likewise. And he said, so we just intuitively knew how to have community and help one another, but we had to learn to hear no. And so maybe that was part of the skills. So it may not be so easy for us to learn community in mutual engagement, but maybe we could really discover some wonderful things doing that too.
Please join me in thanking Arlie Hochschild.